There are some with very big megaphones who are not happy with the president because he did promise, not just during the campaign, but at his inaugural address, that he's the guy who's going to bring peace and not start wars.
Yeah, and he is bringing peace. This is an attempt to stabilize the Middle East. I don't view this, Ashley, as starting a war as much as ending the people who are the preeminent terror threat in the world. They're at war with everybody. They're at war with us, and they're at war with Western civilization.
Now that, okay, so this is a serious question, because we have seen regimes fall and countries not be stabilized. And so what's next?
In today's video, Donna Bash and Ashley Allison calls out Scott Jennings on CNN's State of the Union as a heated clash erupts over the US, strike against Iran, and the risk of escalating conflict in the Middle East. Donna Bash and Ashley Allison press Scott Jennings on the consequences of the decision, questioning the evidence of an imminent threat and raising concerns about oil prices, military strain, and the possibility of another long war. So let's dive in and watch how Dana Bash and Ashley Allison shut down Scott Jennings on CNN's State of the Union.
Generally speaking, are you supportive of what the president is doing?
Absolutely, I'm supportive. I mean, let's face it. This is historic. This has been 47 years in the making that we've found here. That Iran has been funding terrorism, and they have thousands of American citizens' blood on their hands and killed thousands of Americans. Let's not forget what has happened here. They have been funding terrorism for years, and to have this happen and the president to take this action, I applaud him for doing that. And those who are protesting this, the liberals in America who are protesting this, they are protesting it, but the Iranians around the globe, they're celebrating in the streets. They're so happy.
I want to move on because we have some wonderful people here, but it's not just liberals protesting it. There are some hardline conservatives who are not happy. They say the president promised to end wars and not start them.
The president has addressed an imminent threat, and that was important. Iran had thousands of missiles aimed at American bases, and he has addressed that. The Iranians just did not get it. They didn't understand. He has made it clear they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. We cannot afford that. This president has saved millions of lives in the future.
I don't think that there's any tears being shed over the supreme leader being killed, other senior leaders that are responsible for the deaths of Americans or Iranians in Iran. I think the issue here is that there was not actually an imminent threat that was going to reach the United States with ballistic missile capabilities or even their nuclear enrichment program. The nuclear enrichment program, I mean, there was significant damage done during that June 12-day war last year. But the threat that this was imminent, this was more of a war of choice. And I think the larger question here is when the president says to the Iranian people, it's in your hands. Well, how? How is it in their hands if you're not going to have American boots on the ground actually delivering some type of security for election processes, police? It's actually not in their hands. And just one more point that I'll make on this is this war is going to have extreme economic consequences. And I know you probably face questions from your constituents all the time on affordability, gas prices. I mean, there's no question that tomorrow oil markets are going to open up and the cost of the barrel is going to go from $5 to $10, and that's going to hit Americans' pocketbooks.
I think you're overstating the case on the oil. It is going to have some impact on the economy of China because that's where they get their oil from, Iran. And what we did in Venezuela, what we did in China, what we did in Iran has as much to do with China, I think, as anything. I also want to say, may God rest the souls of those troops. But they died in a noble cause. And as Buddy said, 47 years, Americans are dead, the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. I totally disagree with you about the threat not being imminent.
What stood out is how quickly the conversation jumps to certainty about military action while skipping over the long track record of intelligence failures that have shaped U.S. foreign policy. Claims about imminent threats always sound convincing in the moment, but history shows why many analysts approach them cautiously. From the weapons of mass destruction narrative before the Iraq War to later intelligence reassessments, the lesson has been that urgency doesn't always equal accuracy. When decisions involve military escalation, the burden of proof has to be extremely high because the consequences last for years, not just news cycles. There's also the strategic question of what actually reduces conflict in the long run. Even many national security experts acknowledge that targeted strikes can remove individuals but rarely eliminate the underlying systems driving instability. Research from groups like the Council on Foreign Relations has noted that leadership decapitation alone doesn't dismantle state-backed networks or militant groups. In many cases, it reshuffles leadership and creates incentives for retaliation, which can pull countries into longer cycles of escalation. Then there's the economic dimension that often gets brushed aside in the heat of patriotic rhetoric. Global energy markets react quickly to geopolitical shocks, especially in the Middle East, where a large share of the world's oil supply moves through vulnerable routes like the Strait of Hormuz. Even small disruptions can trigger speculation and price spikes. For American families already dealing with inflation pressures, increases in energy costs ripple through transportation, groceries, and manufacturing. That's why caution resonates with many voters. People remember how quickly limited actions can turn into prolonged entanglements. Polls over the past decade consistently show Americans skeptical of new military conflicts unless there's a clear and immediate threat to the homeland.
I spoke to very senior administration officials yesterday. They believe that the Iranian regime was about to fire ballistic missiles, not at the United States, but into U.S. military bases and civilian targets. They were going to attack Israel. They are already attacking other Gulf states.
You can't make the case back then in last year saying that you have completely obliterated the nuclear capabilities of Iran, and then say that there is an imminent threat. I mean, that's a dichotomy that just doesn't exist. And the reality is that the national security apparatus has assessed that there was not an imminent threat.
I know. My guess is I've spoken to higher-ranking officials than you. On the uranium enrichment, the United States offered them free, unlimited, lifetime, civilian-grade nuclear fuel. They said no. They had given us the runaround about their intentions on enriching uranium for military purposes. How long do you want to wait? Death to America? Death to Israel? How long do you want to wait? We waited 47 years. We have crossed every red line. Every president says they want to do something about it. Only Donald Trump had the guts to do it. You said you're not shedding any tears for the regime, but you appear just not to like Donald Trump enough to be mad about it. This is a good thing.
I want to get you in, and I also want to say, every president, U.S. president since Jimmy Carter was opposed to the regime.
And who did something about it?
But the question is, and still is, what comes next?
Yeah.
What's going to happen?
I think I might be representing at this table just like an average American right now that doesn't understand how nuclear weapons actually are developed, don't understand if they're, or know for sure if there was an imminent threat or not. I know many Americans woke up yesterday and said, oh my God, we're at war. Mm-hmm. And today they woke up and said, oh my God, Americans are dead. And I think everyone can say that's just not something we love to say as people, because war does a couple of things. War can bring freedom, but it also brings death. And that is why we have rules and regulations and processes so that we don't just go to war at the decision of a president. We actually empower you, sir, to vote and determine. And if you vote,
and we will vote. We will vote on the War Powers Act.
But do you realize that we're at war now and you haven't?
No, we're not at war now.
So the president says we're at war, but we're not at war.
The president has done his job. He has addressed an imminent threat, and I applaud him for that. He should have. And this is something we need to keep in mind. And when Americans woke up this morning, they were safer. They were safer because Iran is not as strong as they were 2 days ago.
Can I just make the point that Scott was saying? Because I take issue with the fact that you think I'm against everything that this president is doing. I actually think that the 12-day war weakened Iran, and Iran walked away from a deal that they should have taken. I mean, that was a miscalculation on their part, and striking allies and Gulf nations is a miscalculation of Iran. But what I think the larger question here is, Scott, is that this war is going to draw down our stockpiles. It's going to pull capabilities from other regions, including the Indo-Pacific. And at the end of the day, I do think we are losing our eye on the threat of China. And frankly, there is someone in the Pentagon ringing alarm bells about what is happening to our military in terms of the stress it is putting on their extending carriers, et cetera.
Scott,
when things like this heat up, it helps to step back from the talking points and look at the bigger strategic picture. Claims about imminent threats in national security are rarely as simple as they sound on television. Intelligence assessments often involve disagreement inside agencies, and history shows that early warnings can be interpreted very differently depending on the political moment. That's exactly why Congress created safeguards like the War Powers Resolution after the Vietnam era, because decisions about military force carry consequences far beyond the initial strike. There's also the practical issue of military capacity. The United States already maintains major commitments in Europe, the Middle East, and the Indo-Pacific, and defense analysts have repeatedly warned about the strain of managing multiple crises at once. Aircraft carriers, missile defense systems, and surveillance assets can't be everywhere simultaneously. When more resources are directed to one region, it inevitably affects readiness somewhere else, especially as the Pentagon continues emphasizing long-term competition with China. The economic ripple effects are another factor people sometimes gloss over. Energy markets react quickly to instability in the Persian Gulf because a large share of the world's oil supply passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Even small disruptions can push global oil prices upward, and those costs filter down to gas, shipping, and everyday goods. For Americans already dealing with high living costs, geopolitical escalation can quietly hit household budgets. Ultimately, the deeper issue isn't just whether a hostile government poses risks. The real question is whether escalation actually improves long-term security or creates new instability that has to be managed for years. History shows that military actions without a clear endgame often produce consequences far more complicated than the original justification.
I want to ask you about the politics of this because it is mixed in your party. There are some with very big megaphones who are not happy with the president because he did promise, not just during the campaign, but at his inaugural address, that he's the guy who's going to bring peace and not start wars.
Yeah, and he is bringing peace. Iran has been at war with us for 47 years. The central pillar of the regime is death to America. The other pillar is death to Israel, who is our ally. They have been at war with us. They have been killing American personnel and American soldiers for nearly 5 decades. This is not an attempt to start a war. This is an attempt to prevent further conflict. This is an attempt to get the largest state sponsor of terror off the field. This is an attempt to stabilize the Middle East. I don't view this, Ashley, as starting a war as much as ending the people who are the preeminent terror threat in the world. They're at war with everybody. They're at war with us, and they're at war with Western civilization.
This is a serious question because we have seen regimes fall and countries not be stabilized. And so what's next?
Well, gosh, I don't know. I mean, what if we leave a country that for the next 47 years kills Americans, kills American personnel, funds terror around the world? That's what we have now. That's what we couldn't have it any worse now. What comes next?
We actually don't know.
We don't know, actually.
That the Iranian people rise up and take control of their country.
We don't know.
Absolutely. It is up to the Iranian people to make that decision of what happens next. If they make that decision, they will never have a better opportunity to take this government over than they have.
Here's what we can agree on. What we can agree on is that we don't have the answers to what's next.
Right.
Nobody at this table does. And nobody really globally does right now, which is part of the big challenge of where we are right now. Thank you, all of you.
Ashley Allison and Scott Jennings highlighted a crucial point. Strategic focus matters more than optics. While Scott Jennings emphasizes the historic nature of past conflicts, most Americans are more concerned about present stability. Current Pentagon reports indicate that overextension in the Indo-Pacific is already straining U.S. carriers and readiness. Allison's focus on practical outcomes underscores that foreign policy decisions should prioritize long-term security, not just symbolic victories. Ashley Allison also raises valid concerns about the unintended consequences of military actions. Historical data shows that regimes destabilized without a clear post-conflict plan often leave power vacuums, fueling further extremism. By contrast, measured intelligence-driven approaches that coordinate with allies reduce civilian harm and help prevent regional escalation. It's not just theory. Studies from RAND and CSIS show that coordinated diplomacy and precision actions yield better security outcomes than broad military gestures. The economic and geopolitical stakes matter as well. Allison points out that diverting resources to sudden conflicts risks weakening other strategic priorities, particularly in the Indo-Pacific where China's military expansion is accelerating. Overcommitting in one region can leave gaps elsewhere. Voters also react to domestic consequences. Rising defense spending, energy costs, and resource strain affect day-to-day life, highlighting why policy decisions need careful evaluation beyond rhetoric. Finally, Allison's approach reflects public sentiment for accountable leadership. Americans want decisions grounded in facts, risk assessment, and humane considerations, not just headlines. While Scott Jennings frames this as decisiveness, Allison emphasizes outcomes, long-term stability, and ethical responsibility. That lens resonates with voters who worry about both national security and the human, financial, and political costs of rushed military actions. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.